Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the Love and Light podcast, powered by 103.9 WDKX. This is episode 41, and there is a lot going on in our community. Last week we talked about, Sanctuary City and being in the sanctuary and all of that. And, this week we're going to touch on something that's happening here locally in Rochester. That's a pretty hot topic, the Police Accountability Board. And we're going to delve into that for a couple minutes. But before we do that, I wanted to, for our love lifting segment, really lift up Changing the Community. It's CTC. It's a young sports group that's here, not-for-profit sports group that work with young men that's in high school that are looking to play college football and professional football. Two of their students, just people that they worked with in the past, just got drafted to the NFL. Nice. And about 2 weeks ago, they brought colleges from all over the country here to East High School, and they had a jamboree where they featured local high school students. They were able to try out for these college coaches, and they were able to see them run, see them tackle, see them pass. And it was absolutely phenomenal. 7 of those students received full scholarship offers to the colleges that were here. They had Syracuse University. They had the University of Nebraska here. They had UB here. I mean, it was just amazing to see. And so when our young people are doing good things in our community, we definitely need to highlight that. As I talked about before, everybody knows my daughter plays lacrosse. And so in the summertime, in the wintertime, the students get to, really go practice at the city sports complex. And I saw these young men come in week after week, not only doing their conditioning, but also academics. And so these are all scholar athletes. And so really want to give a big love lifting segment to Greg Hopkins and CTC for the work that they're doing on behalf of our young people.
So, yeah, I think it's important that and exciting for not only those families, those athletes, those families, but also those coaches,
yes,
who really take their time out. It's a lot of sacrifice to be coaching these athletes and their families. And so I'm glad that you.
That's a lot going. And as you mentioned, coaches change lives, right? Yeah, if you have a coach that invests in you, that believe in you, I know for Taylor that means everything, right? Her coach that works with her, in season, off season, really has changed her perspective on the game. But also it is like a big brother or a father figure for many of our young people that engage. And I think that sports keep them connected to something, gives them something to do. And so if you have a young person that, I remember when I was young and I played, I cheerlead for Southwest Colts and Pop Warner football. And I even look now with the Rams and all of that, Southwest, all of them are still going. Yes. You see all the families that come out that enjoy and things like that. And, some of those young people we lose along the way. But if we can keep them engaged in something that they're energized about, I think that that's very, very important. So I want to say big up to Coach London Booker, who got the young Rock E6 kids all supporting lacrosse here in the city of Rochester.
All right. Well, big up. So those coaches, not only do they help to train, help to inspire and encourage and empower these young people and these athletes, but they also hold them accountable. And so since we're talking about accountability, it leads us to some things that are happening here locally. And I don't think people really know the history or really understand how involved we both were in this whole inception of the Police Accountability Board here in Rochester, New York. So I wanted to kind of back up a little bit, explain to people, some people who may be hearing for the first time, they may not understand police accountability, they may not understand the inception of it, how it came about, and all of those kind of things. But we both were in office at the time where police accountability was implemented, when the vote, overwhelming vote from the public, and I believe it was 2019, we had an overwhelming vote from the public that created the Police Accountability Board. So it was a referendum which we don't tend to see happen too often in our voting process, local referendum. So this was a local referendum, had to be put on referendum
on the ballot,
on the ballot for it to even be able to be even considered by the people. And we don't get to see that often. So that by itself was something that I think was different for the community, was an experience for the community. And some even argue they wish that more things were put in that kind of platform for they can have more input on, as opposed to, just that one time.
Right.
But the Police Accountability Board was put on there. I think it was about 70% or so voted in favor of the Police Accountability Board, which in myself at the time was appointed to be a part of that when you were mayor. And a big up to former President Loretta C. Scott, who it really was her baby, if you will. And she was very passionate, is very passionate about the Police Accountability Board. I think it was her, myself, and Councilmember Mitch Gruber, who were the council members who were part of drafting the legislation to change our city charter to include, to make, because that, and then even before the Police Accountability Board, we had something in place, right? So we had the Civilian Review Board. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think that, we always have to give credit where credit is due, because, former Councilmember Adam McFadden was very big when it came down to the Civilian Review Board. And the Civilian Review Board was, operated by the Center for Dispute Settlement. And
Sherry Coward, Walker.
Sherry Walker cohort,
who ends up coming back later for the current Police Accountability Board.
And so it was really a place where people could come. They could file a complaint. Something happened with the police in our community in the city of Rochester. They could come. They could file a complaint. They could get that complaint heard by a Civilian Review Board. That Civilian Review Board had really no power, discipline power. They would work with the police department, work with the police chief's office, to have the Department of Internal Affairs, do the investigation. And then they, them themselves would get information about what happened with that particular complaint. The police chief, of course, is the final decision making, as he's the person that's in the chain of command to be able to reprimand. And so that's what happened with the Civilian Review Board.
So as former mayor, as a lawyer, and also as a citizen, right? And this is something that I heard, and this was an argument that was made in the barbershop that I heard as a lot. People were going, well, listen, why do we need a Civilian Review Board? Why do we need a Police Accountability Board when the accountability should be coming from the police chief or the mayor? Like, that doesn't accountability start there? And so I think that's an important piece to kind of flesh out a little bit, because people are wondering, like, if the mayor hires the police chief, right? And they work directly for the mayor, and then the police chief has the ability to hire and fire officers, right? Based on whatever that
based
may be.
On the contract.
Contract and or conduct based on the contract. So any accountability, you would think, starts with those two individuals off the bat.
Well, it always do. It starts there and it ends there. And that's what the courts have said, right? And so you do have that chain of command. You do have that person that is responsible ultimately to hold an officer accountable for their conduct based on whatever the contract says. And so in that argument that people have made is like, okay, well, you have accountability there. And, what the people on the other side is that we don't trust that.
That's
and you know what I mean? So they're saying that we don't trust that that police are going to hold police accountable for the things and the actions the way the community might see it, right? And so there's often this, seeing things through the eyes of blue, seeing things through the eyes of being a police officer versus seeing things through the eyes of being a community member. And that's the reason why people have advocated for it.
And or I would add to that not only, people use this word cold blue, where, oftentimes police aren't going to tell on police, or you people would think, well, okay, what about the mayor? So the mayor has a role there too, right? So some people also say, okay, it could get too political too, and that's why they don't trust that as well either. Hence why we had the Civilian Review Board, and then people lost kind of faith, if you will, in the Civilian Review Board. And one of the things that I think people that our listeners and viewers may not understand, the Civilian Review Board also it sat under the police department. And that was one of the major changes with the current Police Accountability Board. Just to give you the timeline, in 2019, the Police Accountability Board was overwhelmingly supported by referendum. In 2023, the Court of Appeals stripped the board of its disciplinary powers and investigative authority. And then just recently, in April of 2025, a state Supreme Court ruling, Justice Wardolph further limited the PAB's power, restricting subpoena and individual investigations. In May, in response to the PAB pause individual case investigations, and the city of Rochester filed an appeal against these restrictions. Now, people need to understand the 5 pillars that the PAB was standing on: independence, investigation, subpoena power, disciplinary power, and review and evaluation. And one of the things right off the bat was independence. And that was one of the things that why the community wanted to get rid of CRB and wanted to move to a more independent model of a police accountability board. Hence, we took the city council, that is, took the out of the budget and out of the Civilian Review Board and the new Police Accountability Board. We created a whole new division under the city council, and not answering directly or to the police chief and or the mayor, which gave it some ability of independency, right? And then those other pillars were the disciplinary, the civilian, the ability to subpoena, and all of those things. And since then, those things have been struck down, because the big excitement about the whole police accountability was, oh, wow, they had more than CRB. And then some people would say now, would argue, does PAB have less than what CRB had prior to Police Accountability Board inception?
It's possible. I haven't been intricately involved in the new ruling and reading what happened. But as you know, when I was mayor, my position was, and I had put forth legislation that council at the time rejected. In the state of New York, you have something that's called the Taylor Law. You also have the contract with the union, and basically you have rules that are in place on how you are to conduct yourselves. There's that process and that information that is passed down to our police department, our officers, and all of that, and their chain of command is ultimately the police chief that has the final decision-making power. And the police chief, of course, answers to the mayor. And so the Taylor Law is very, very clear on certain things. And city council at the time didn't agree with me. But I think that the ruling that was just put in place outlines that the ability to subpoena, the ability to discipline officers completely lies within the police department, and the police chief has the final say, and you cannot, as an outside entity, influence that decision.
And I think what you're saying now and what you're leading to, and is exactly one of the questions I was just getting ready to ask you, is what does real police accountability look like? And I think you just kind of, basically gave the definition of what that should look like. However, unfortunately, and not just Rochester, we're seeing this all across the country when it comes to police misconduct, when it comes to, just the indifferences and the injustices that people are seeing in regards to dealing with the justice system and all of that. So at the end of the day, where are we as far as, police accountability for the city of Rochester? This is now, it's been appealed by the city. And these appeals could last years.
Yeah, it's the second time, but the issue hasn't changed, right? From the very beginning, I would say that this issue of what the state law requires, this issue of who who has the final decision making power as it pertains to holding an officer accountable or what that discipline should be has not changed, right? And so what I think that, our position should be like, if you want to change it, then you have to advocate in the state legislature to have that particular rule or issue change. Without that, you are stuck with what the law isn't going to change. And I think that what you see is that the courts actually reading the law and reading how it's written in the contract and all those things, and saying like, well, based on this here, this is what it is. And if you want to change, then it's not that the referendum or city council doesn't have the power to change it themselves. You need to go to the legislature, the state legislature, and ask for that change.
So here again, we see different levels of government. And on our show all the time, we're always leading people and educating people and informing them of the different nuances when it comes to certain laws, policy, practices, procedures, and what wheelhouse they actually fall into. And it can get very cumbersome for people. But what we want people to understand in this episode also is there's pros and cons to everything. So, it was good that the people had an opportunity to voice their opinions, to vote for this, because the people clearly said that they want to have a independent police accountability in Rochester, New York. The positives are this is you have that now. You have an outlet when you have a situation outside of the normal police, filing a complaint with the police department, of an independent organization that you can now file a complaint, and their information is they're very public. They have a lot of ways of getting in contact with them and being transparent about, and being also confidential around your being able to submit your complaint. And then on top of that, I believe we can't lose sight of the fact, because, when you were mayor and I was chair of public safety, there were a couple officers we held accountable. And when I say we,
the system, the system can work. The current system can work, right? And, we also had our challenges, or I can say I had my challenges, right? And so, there are times when the system, doesn't work. But at the end of the day, if there is a clear partnership, and making sure that, and I think at the end of the day, we have a situation where, officers put on a uniform, they go, they put their lives in danger every day, by going out and as as a firefighter, putting on your uniform, going out and into these fires and helping people. I think inherently there is this sense to do good, right? And sometimes it just doesn't happen. Sometimes maybe you're having a bad day. And when those things happen, you have to, the chief, when those complaints come in, has got to show the community like, yeah, I understand. I'm gonna hold accountable these individuals. But the problem with the civilian review board that people had was you didn't necessarily know the outcome of the discipline, right? Was the person suspended? Right. Were they fired? What happened? You can say like, oh, they were disciplined, but the actual discipline and the penalty that was imposed on a person, that's not public knowledge, right? And so part of the reason why people wanted the police accountability board was because they wanted to know, well, was this person fired? Was this person suspended for 3 weeks? Was this person what was the recommendation? What was the outcome? And the law currently doesn't allow you to really know all of that information. And so it is a delicate balance. But I think that if you have a situation where you see the chief coming out, calling a spade and holding, someone that is not upholding the law accountable, and praising those folks that go the extra mile accountable, accountable and saying that, I think that you will have a community that has more confidence in the whole system as a whole.
Episode 41, we're talking about police accountability. As we bring today's episode to a close, remember that the timeline is from 2019 to 2025. It's not mere a sequence of events, right? It's our collective stories of relentless hope and activism. Even when the current restrictions, every challenge presents an opportunity for all of us, our listeners and viewers, to steer the narrative and work for accountability systems that reflect our shared values of transparency, fairness, and justice. So that's what we're looking for, and we expect everyone to keep fighting that fight. And we're looking for, what's going to happen in the future for PAB. But the bottom line is that we all agree that accountability and justice is a must.
Yeah, I think that is something that we definitely have to pay attention to. And as you guys and as the city moves forward with the appeal and looking at it, I think that they have to tackle this on two fronts. I don't think that the law is going to change on its own. You have to look at that and recognize what the justices have been saying thus far about where the path forward lies. And I don't think is going to lie just solely on the court system, because I don't think that position is going to change based on what's on the law and what's in the books right now. So I am Lovely Warren. Dance like nobody's watching, sing like there's no one listening, live like it's heaven on earth, and love like you've never been hurt.
And I'm Willie Lightfoot, and we want to continue to hear your comments about the show. And remember, you can't put a lampshade on the sun. Keep letting your light shine. Peace.